Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Kolkata Centre for Creativity's Army Arts Festival. And we are very, very happy that all of you are here this evening. And if there is anybody in the audience for whom it's the first time, then we would say that do visit us again, and particularly during the tenure of the festival, which is on till the 21st of December. You can look up our website, the social media pages, because there are a plethora of performances, theatre, music, talks like the one this evening, panel discussions, musical performances, performances related to heritage. We are also at the Indian Museum at the moment celebrating World Heritage Week, and after that we will be at the Victoria Memorial Hall next week for Utsav, which is the encouragement for upcoming artists. I could go on, but that's not the intention this evening. Before we move into the proceedings for this evening, there is a very brief message from our chairperson, Mrs. Richa Agarwal, because she's not in town at the moment, but there is a welcome message from her for everyone. So we'll just watch that on the screen, and then I will hand over proceedings to Mr. S V Raman.
Hello everyone. As we celebrate the 6th edition of the Army Arts Festival, I'm filled with immense pride at how this initiative has evolved into one of Kolkata's and KCC's most dynamic and inclusive celebration of art and culture. Army. Army is not just a festival, but a philosophy that recognizes the power of creativity to bring people together. It represents both individuality and collective spirit, bridging disciplines, language, communities through dialogue, performance, and expression. Each edition has strengthened our belief that art can inspire empathy, understanding, and change. Through Army, we aim to nurture a space where artists and audiences can meet as equals to share, question, and imagine a more connected cultural future. My heartfelt gratitude to all of the artists, curators, collaborators, well-wishers, partners, and my team who continue to make this festival a vibrant testament to the creative spirit of our times. Looking forward to seeing you all at AMI to celebrate us, to celebrate you.
It's over to Mr. S V Raman because he is going to moderate this evening. He is a regular face at KCC, whether it's the festival or not. There are two other faces here. One person who pioneers one of our major events every year, that's Sri Chandril Bhattacharya, who curates Boitokhana. Samik Babu, I think, needs no introduction because he is someone that everyone in the city beyond all know, and we are very, very happy that he's here this evening. But everyone is actually here to discuss and talk about the book, The Tree Within, by Sri Indranil Chakravarty. I hand over to Mr. Raman to take us through the evening.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Pridarshini, for that introduction and the brief trailer to the events that are going to unfold as part of the Army Arts Festival. Thank you. You see, the evening is about this book, The Tree Within. And this is a book that Indranil Chakravarty has written. I know Indranil for a long, long time. And we have had common interests, like in the field of cinema, particularly Latin American cinema, where he has delved deep into the subject and also had very personal relationships with film schools, with filmmakers from that part of the world, and making them more understood to our kind of audiences. And even when filmmakers visited this country, Indranil has played a very, very important role in guiding them through whatever they should know of India, and also telling the people who came to view the films about the hidden perspectives of these filmmakers and what they had in their minds when they made the films that they did to make them popular here. So if I start introducing Indranil in details, it will take a long, long time. So I would just stick to the brief introduction here. He's an academic, filmmaker trained at the Escuela Internacional de Cine y Televisión in Havana, with a PhD in Victoria University of Wellington, New Zealand. For over 2 decades, he has taught film history and screenwriting at leading film institutes in India and abroad. His research spans biopics, world cinema, and cosmopolitanism, and his work has appeared in leading international journals. His books include The New Latin American Cinema and India's Audiovisual Market and Analysis, as well as Descubriendo a Tagore, Rediscovering Tagore, published in Spanish, about the discourse around the Indian poet in Hispanic literature. He is currently a Homi Bhabha Fellow, and of course, it goes without saying that, I have read the book already, and some of us already have, and I can only tell you that, you should read the book to delve into the various facets of the subject matter of the book, Octavio Paz, and his connections to India. Not only that, but he as a diplomat and as a multi-hatted person, wearing many hats over here. And to discuss with Indranil, of course, we have two stalwarts here. Chandril, as Priyadarshini has already told you, is part of the KCC scheme of things every year. And Chandril is a lyricist, Bengali, now people call him a thinker also, because the old adage was what Bengal thinks today, the rest of India thinks tomorrow. And now with Chandril, what has happened is what Chandril says today, most of the intellectuals of Bengal say tomorrow, you see. So that is a kind of hold he has, sway he has about opinions of things that are going on. And about Samik, of course, we all know him. He has participated in a lot of discussions, not only at this center, editor, scholar, film critic, theatre critic, and above all, a mentor to all of us. You see, so Samik, Chandril, Indranil, all of you welcome. So may I first suggest that there is the formality of launching the book in front, so maybe just do that and get it over with, and after that we go into the conversation. So please do come up. Such photo ops are very important. And the publishers, Penguin, would certainly love this kind of frame over here. Right. Okay. Indranil, would you like to say a few words at the beginning about the book before Chandril gives his comments?
I will just briefly at this stage talk that the Mexican poet, Nobel Laureate, Octavio Paz, is now considered one of the greatest poets of the 20th century. And if you go by the amount of research that goes on around him that I have encountered while writing this book, then he's possibly and the number of books written on him, he's possibly the second after T.S. Eliot in terms of the volume of work. So his stature has been rising with time. And so for a long period in my life, I have been in love with Octavio Paz, and Octavio Paz was in love with India. So this book is a product of that love, that mutual love. This book, I wrote it for myself, basically. I had to do it for myself. And in doing that, tracking his entire life in India, and I've been living with this book. I wrote this book in the last 2 years, but it has been building up in my mind for many, many years. Like all books, every book takes 20 years to build up in your mind, right? So this book is a result of that, and I'm keenly looking forward to people who have read the book, at least part of the book or the whole of the book, and what they think. I was telling somebody that I'm feeling like a student whose board exams are going to come out and the results are going to come out, and I'm looking forward to what how did I fare in the exams. Okay, over to Chandril. By the way, Chandril was my student many years ago.
Yeah, Chandril was incidentally Indranil's student, and Chandril has read the book in detail and has a lot of notes over here. Not that he's going to read from it, he's going to speak the way he does always. But sometimes it's also necessary to sort of show the people that you have actually read the book and gone through it in detail. So Chandril, over to you.
I would apologize to anybody who doesn't understand Bangla, because I'm going to speak in Bangla. Nothing doing, I can't speak in English. ইন্দ্রনীল দা যেটা বললেন যে উনি আমার শিক্ষক ছিলেন সত্যজিৎ রায় ফিল্ম ইনস্টিটিউটে, আমার মনে আছে ইন্দ্রনীল দা যখন প্রথমে এলেন তখন আমরা শুনলাম যে কিউবার ফিল্ম ইনস্টিটিউট থেকে একজন এসেছেন। তো এরকম অদ্ভুত কথা আমরা কখনো শুনিনি, আমেরিকাটা কিউবার ফিল্ম ইনস্টিটিউট থেকে একজন এসেছেন। তারপর জানতে পারলাম বোধহয় এক সপ্তাহের মধ্যে যে ইন্দ্রনীল দা এমন কিছু ক্লাস করেছেন যে ক্লাস নিয়েছেন গ্যাব্রিয়েল গার্সিয়া মার্কেজ। আমি রোজ ইন্দ্রনীলদার কাছে গিয়ে বলতাম, আচ্ছা গার্সিয়া মার্কেজ কি বললেন আপনাকে? আর ইন্দ্রনীলদা বলতেন যে ওই তো কতগুলো এসে লিখতে দিল, আমরা সব জমা দিলাম, কয়েকটা ভুল দেখিয়ে দিল, যেন বাজারে গেছিলাম বাঁধাকপি কিনলাম। এইভাবে যে কেউ গার্সিয়া মার্কেজ সম্পর্কে কথা বলতে পারে আমরা ভাবতে পারতাম না। এবং এখন আবার ইন্দ্রনীলদা ফোন করে বললেন, শোনো না আমি অক্তাভিও পাজ সম্পর্কে একটা বই লিখেছি, তা তুমি যদি একটু পড়ে টড়ে একটু বলে দাও। তখন বুঝলাম যে এই লোকটা লাতিন আমেরিকার রাজাদের সঙ্গে ঘোরে, মানে বিরাট ব্যাপার আর কি, একজন মাস্তান। বইটা আমার পড়ে খুব ভালো লেগেছে, তার অনেকগুলো কারণ আছে, তার কয়েকটা আপনাদের বলি। প্রথম কথা, বইটা তরতরে ঝরঝরে অপূর্ব গদ্যে লেখা। এই বইটা যেখান থেকে আপনি পড়তে শুরু করবেন পড়তে পারবেন। এই বই তো সেই গোছে যে আপনি বইয়ের তাক গোছাতে গেছেন, বইটা নামিয়ে নিলেন হয়তো পরিষ্কার করার জন্যে, কিন্তু খুলে আপনি ভুলে গেছেন কখন আপনি 25 পাতা পড়ে ফেলেছেন। এই রকম একটা চমৎকার ঝলমলে গল্পের মতন করে এই গোটা প্রবন্ধের বইটা লেখা, প্রচণ্ড ওয়েল রিসার্চড, কিন্তু এই চূড়ান্ত দুরন্ত গবেষণার কোনো ছাপ, তথ্য পরিসংখ্যান কোনো খোঁজ হয়ে উঠে নেই গোটা বইটায়। ওটা আখ্যানের মধ্যে বোনা আছে, ও গতিটাকে কখনো ব্যাহত করবে না। কিন্তু আমার সবচেয়ে এটা ভালো লেগেছে সেটা বলি। উনিও বললেন যে বইটা লেখা, এই নিয়ে আমরা ওপরে প্রচ্ছদেও দেখতে পাবো যে বইটা লেখা অক্তাভিও পাজ ভারতে যে বছরগুলো কাটিয়েছেন তাই নিয়ে, কিন্তু বইটা তাই নিয়ে নয়, বইটা আরও অনেক কিছু নিয়ে। মানে ইন্দ্রনীল দা প্রচুর মানুষের কথা, প্রচুর ঘটনার কথা সমান যত্নে বলছেন, ওর কোনো তাড়া নেই। এটা বলে তাড়াতাড়ি অক্টাভিও পাজের প্রসঙ্গটায় চলে যাই, ওটাই তো আমার ফোকাস, এভাবে বইটা লেখা নয়। এইটা বইটার অভিনবত্ব। উনি যখন বলছেন প্রথমে যে মেক্সিকো আর ভারতের অনেকগুলো সাংস্কৃতিক আদান প্রদান আছে, বহুকাল থেকেই আছে, বলতে গিয়ে অনেক কথা বলছে। আমরা কি সত্যি কেউ জানি যে মেক্সিকোর বিপ্লবের একজন প্রধান হোতা তিনি ভগবদ্গীতার দ্বারা অনুপ্রাণিত ছিলেন? কিংবা জিড্ডু কৃষ্ণমূর্তি লিখেছেন, ফ্রিডা কালো সেগুলো পড়ছেন, আবার জিড্ডু কৃষ্ণমূর্তি যখন দর্শন নিয়ে বক্তৃতা লিখছেন ফ্রিডা কালো সেই বক্তৃতাগুলো শুনতে যাচ্ছেন। অথবা আমাদের একজন পাণ্ডুরং খানকোজে, তিনি ওখানে গিয়ে একটা কৃষি বিপ্লব ঘটিয়ে ফেলছেন। এই জিনিসগুলো আমাদের কখনো মাথায় থাকে না। এবং মানবেন্দ্রনাথ রায়, আমাদের একজন বাঙালি এম.এন. রায়, তিনি গিয়ে মেক্সিকোর কমিউনিস্ট পার্টির অন্যতম প্রতিষ্ঠাতা হচ্ছেন। আর সুর বলে একটা ম্যাগাজিন, সেটা আর্জেন্টিনা থেকে বেরোচ্ছে, সেটা আমাদের ভিক্টোরিয়া ওকাম্পো বার করছেন, সেখানে অক্টাভিও পাজ লিখছেন। এবং আমরা তো ওকাম্পোর সঙ্গে রবীন্দ্রনাথের একটা মোটামুটি যোগাযোগের কথা জানি, যে রবীন্দ্রনাথের ছবির এক্সিবিশন ওকাম্পো করছেন। ফলে মেক্সিকো আর ভারতের এই যে আদান প্রদান, এটা বলতে গিয়ে ইন্দ্রনীল দা অনেক কথা বলছেন। আবার পরে আপনি যদি আপনার ওই নোটস পড়েন, ফুটনোট উনি দেননি, শেষকালে নোটস দিন, সেখানে আবার আরও চমৎকার কিছু দেখা যাবে। যেমন ধরুন গীতা যাকে প্রাণিত করেছিল, গীতার তিনি যে ব্যাখ্যা করতেন সেটা শুনলে আমাদের সেটাকে বিকৃত ব্যাখ্যা বলেও মনে হতে পারে। আর মানবেন্দ্রনাথ রায় বোধহয় মূর্ছ যাবেন জানলে যে এই মুহূর্তে মেক্সিকো সিটির একটি অত্যন্ত ট্রেন্ডি নাইট ক্লাবের নাম হচ্ছে এম.এন. রয়। উনি হয়তো ঠিক সেইভাবে মেক্সিকো যাননি, কিন্তু কি করা যাবে, সেরকমটা হয়ে গেছে। তা এই সমস্ত আখ্যানগুলো এখানে বোনা আছে। সতীশ গুজরালকে আমাদের অক্টাভিও পাজ প্রচুর সাহায্য করেছেন চিত্রকর হিসেবে প্রতিষ্ঠিত হতে। এইবার সতীশ গুজরালকে নিয়ে ইন্দ্রনীল দা একটা গোটা আলাদা অধ্যায় লিখেছেন। এবার সেখানে নায়ক অক্টাভিও পাজও, কিন্তু আরও বড় নায়ক হচ্ছেন সতীশ গুজরাল নিজে। তিনি যাচ্ছেন মেক্সিকোয়, ফ্রিডা কালোর সঙ্গে তার বন্ধুত্ব হচ্ছে, তার বাড়িতে যাচ্ছেন, গল্প গুজব করছেন। এই বলতে বলতে ইন্দ্রনীল দা ফ্রিডা কালোকে নিয়েও লিখছেন, তিনি কে ছিলেন। ওরকম অসহ্য শারীরিক কষ্ট নিয়ে ফ্রিডা কালো নিরন্তর ছবি এঁকে চলেছেন। এবং মৃত্যুর কিছুদিন আগে তিনি ডায়েরিতে আঁকছেন কালো কঙ্কালের ছবি এবং কালো কতগুলো এঞ্জেলের ছবি। আর তারপর ফ্রিডা কালো বলে গেছিলেন তাকে যেন পোড়ানো হয়। যখন পোড়ানো হচ্ছে, প্রচণ্ড উত্তাপে ফ্রিডা কালোর মৃতদেহটা উঠে বসছে, এবং উঠে বসার পর তার চুলগুলো জ্যোতির মতো তার মাথাটার চারপাশটা ঘিরে আছে। এবং তার মৃতদেহ যখন দগ্ধ হয়ে যাচ্ছে, তার ছাইগুলো বেরিয়ে আসছে, তখন দিয়েগো রিভেরা, আমরা যারা জানি যে তাঁর আর ফ্রিডা কালোর সম্পর্ক নিয়েই 200টা বই লেখা যায় বা হয়েছে, সেই দিয়েগো রিভেরা ফ্রিডা কালোর ছাই এক মুঠো নিয়ে খাচ্ছেন এবং খেয়ে বলছেন ফ্রিডা আমার সঙ্গে মিশে আছে। কেউ বলতে পারে এই কথাগুলো আসছে কেন বাবু, তুমি তো অক্টাভিও পাজ নিয়ে বই লিখছো, তার মধ্যে এতগুলো গল্প তুমি আনছো কেন? কিন্তু এতর দ্বারা এই গোটা সময়টার একটা বড় সংস্কৃতির প্রবাহর একটা চালচিত্র ইন্দ্রনীলদা তৈরি করছে, একটা কোলাজ। প্রচুর মানুষ, প্রচুর ঘটনা, তারা সবাই বর্ণময় মানুষ, তাদের কোথাও না কোথাও অবদান আছে, মেক্সিকান সংস্কৃতিতে আছে, ভারতীয় সংস্কৃতিতে আছে, এবং ভারতীয়দের ক্রমাগত প্রভাবিত করে যাচ্ছে। সতীশ গুজরাল সম্পর্কে আরও চমৎকার কতগুলো গল্প আছে। তার সংক্ষেপে একটা কথা এই যে উনি নেহেরুর একটা প্রতিকৃতি এঁকেছিলেন, সেটা আবার অনেকে পছন্দ হয়নি, কিন্তু নেহেরু বলেছিলেন ঠিক আছে হ্যান ত্যান। তারপর ইন্দিরা গান্ধীর একটা প্রতিকৃতি আঁকো, ইন্দিরা গান্ধীর প্রতিকৃতি উনি আঁকছেন তখন ইতিমধ্যেই, এবং ইন্দিরা গান্ধীর স্বামী উনি যখন আঁকছেন বসে আর ইন্দিরা গান্ধী সিটিং দিচ্ছেন, তখন স্বামী মাঝে মাঝে এরকম করে দেখে চলে যাচ্ছেন খুবই কটমট করে তাকিয়ে। তারপর সেই ছবিটা আঁকা হয়ে গেছে, আঁকার পর নেহেরু বলেছেন কই দেখাও কি আঁকলে, তখন কিছুতেই উনি দেখাতে চাইছেন না, কিন্তু কিন্তু করছেন কেন না, ছবিটায় ওর মনে হয়েছে যে ইন্দিরা গান্ধীকে একটু রুথলেস দেখতে হয়েছে। তা নেহেরুকে তো আর বলা যায় না ছবিটা একেবারেই দেখাবো না, নেহেরুকে নেহেরু দেখেছেন, দেখে চলে যাচ্ছেন, এ প্রায় সিনেমার মতন, যেতে যেতে পেছন ফিরে তাকিয়ে ঘাড় ঘুরিয়ে বলছেন শি ইজ রুথলেস। মানে ছবিটা ভালোই হয়েছে আর কি, তুমি ঠিকঠাকই ধরতে পেরেছো। পরে যখন ইন্দ্রনীলদা লিখবেন যে কিভাবে ভারতীয় সংস্কৃতি ও ভারতীয় সংস্কৃতিকে, তার মধ্যে মেক্সিকো আছে অন্য জায়গাও আছে, প্রভাবিত করে চলেছে, তখন সেখানে আলেকজান্ডারের প্রসঙ্গ আসছে, ম্যাক্স মুলারেরও প্রসঙ্গ আসছে, কার্ল গুস্তাভ ইয়ুংয়েরও প্রসঙ্গ আসছে, যিনি কোনারকের মন্দিরের ভাস্কর্য থেকে প্রায় মুচ্চকে ছিলেন। তিনি বলেছিলেন এগুলো এক্সকুইজিটলি অবসিন, এবং সবচেয়ে এটা বড় কথা, তিনি নাকি তখন এমন সব স্বপ্ন দেখতে শুরু করেছিলেন যা তিনিই বিশ্লেষণ করতে পারছিলেন না। কোনারকের ভাস্কর্য দেখা স্বপ্ন, এটা সোজা কথা নয়। তো এই কথাগুলোও আসছে। আবার যখন একটা সময় আরেকটা গল্প বলি, সেখানে অক্টাভিও পাজ বুদ্ধদেব বসুর সঙ্গে দেখা করতে আসছেন আমাদের কলকাতা। এবার ঝামেলা হচ্ছে ওই মুহূর্তে বুদ্ধদেব বসু আইওয়া বিশ্ববিদ্যালয়ে পড়াতে চলে গেছেন, ফলে দেখা হচ্ছে না, কিন্তু জ্যোতির্ময় দত্ত ব্যবস্থা করে দিয়েছেন ওর বাড়িতে গিয়ে অনেক বন্ধু বান্ধবের সঙ্গে, ওখানে বোধহয় ছিলেন অরুণ কুমার সরকার, আবু সৈয়দ আয়ুব, আরও কয়েকজন, তাদের সঙ্গে গল্প গুজব হবে। তা সেখানে আবার বুদ্ধদেবের মেয়ে মীনাক্ষী দত্ত প্রন ককটেল তৈরি করে দিয়েছে, তাই খেতে খেতে অক্টাভিও পাজ তার সুন্দরী বউকে নিয়ে প্রচুর কথা বলছেন, এবং সবাই তার পাণ্ডিত্য দেখে স্তম্ভিত। বাবা, এই তো সফোক্লিসও জানে, মালার্মেও জানে, আবার নাগার্জুনও জানে, ভর্তৃহরিও জানে, আবার দেখতেও এত সুন্দর, বাঙালিরা খুব স্তম্ভিত হয়ে যাচ্ছে। এই গল্প তো উনি বলছেনই, কিন্তু তার আগের অনুচ্ছেদে ইন্দ্রনীলদা বুদ্ধদেব বসু কে, কত বড় একজন বিদ্বান, কত বড় একজন সম্পাদক, কবিতা ভবন কি, সেখান থেকে নিয়মিত যে কবিতা প্রকাশ হচ্ছে সেটাও লিখে দিচ্ছেন। মানে এইখানে কারোর নামে 2 লাইন লেখা আছে, কারোর নামে 4 পাতা লেখা আছে, কিন্তু কোন চরিত্রকে ইন্দ্রনীলদা না, ও তো অক্টাভিও পাজ না বা সরাসরি সম্পৃক্ত নয় তার সঙ্গে বলে অযত্ন করছেন না। প্রত্যেকের সম্পর্কে কিছু না কিছু লিখে তার ভূমিকাটা কি, তার অবদানটা কি, তিনি কি করে চলেছেন, এইটা ইন্দ্রনীলদা সযত্নে তৈরি করছেন, যার জন্য গোটা ক্যানভাসটা আমাদের সামনে তৈরি হয়ে চলেছে। যেটা আমার সবচেয়ে ভালো লেগেছে অক্টাভিও পাজ সম্পর্কে, এমনিতে আপনারা পড়লে বুঝতে পারবেন, এই আলোচনাতেও বুঝতে পারবেন, তিনি একজন অসামান্য কবি ছিলেন, প্রচুর কবিতার অনুবাদ এই বইতে আছে, ইন্দ্রনীলদা কিছু নিজেও করেছেন, তার দর্শন অসামান্য, তিনি আরও বহু কাজ করেছেন, প্রবন্ধ লিখেছেন, অন্য মানুষের জীবনী লিখেছেন, অনেক কিছু করেছেন। আর তার জীবনে তো এমন অনেক ঘটনা ঘটেছে যা পড়লে আপনারা ভাববেন যে খুব খারাপ চিত্রনাট্য যারা লেখে তারা এরকম করে। মানে অক্টাভিও পাজ একজনকে ভালোবাসতেন, তারপর তার সঙ্গে ছাড়াছাড়ি হয়ে গেছে, কোনো সম্পর্ক নেই, জানেনও না তিনি কোথায় আছেন। তারপর প্যারিসে একটা হোটেলে থাকার কথা বাতিল করে অক্টাভিও পাজ আরেকটা হোটেল বুক করেছেন অন্য একটা কারণে, সেই হোটেল থেকে বেরোবার সময় রাস্তা দিয়ে প্যারিসে সেই মহিলাই রাস্তা দিয়ে তখন যাচ্ছেন, আর উনি দরজা দিয়ে তখন বেরোচ্ছেন। মানে বাজে 3য় শ্রেণীর হিন্দি ছবিতে এরকম সমাপতন হয়ে প্রেম হয়ে যায়, সেই রকমও অক্টাভিও পাজের জীবনে ঘটেছে। কিন্তু এইসব ছাড়ি আমার যেটা ভাল লেগেছে, উনি ভারতে এসে একদম তরুণ শিল্পীদের খুঁজে বার করছেন, তারপর তাদের সঙ্গে বন্ধুত্ব করছেন, সমকক্ষের মতো মিশছেন, এবং তারপর তাদের যার পর নাই সাহায্য করছেন। কেন? তার কোনো দায় নেই। নতুন ছেলে ছবি আঁকছে, তার স্টুডিওতে গিয়ে অক্টাভিও পাজ ঘন্টার পর ঘন্টা বসে আছেন, ছবি আঁকা দেখছেন, তার বাড়িতে এরা চলে আসছে, কেউ ইতিহাস নিয়ে পড়াশোনা করে, কেউ সাহিত্যিক হতে চায়, কেউ চিত্রকর হতে চায়, ঘন্টার পর ঘন্টা আড্ডা মারছে। হ্যাঁ, তার অন্য ইনসেন্টিভ আছে শিল্পীদের যা থাকে, খুব বড় মানুষ, এত বড় পদে কাজ করেন, গেলে বিনি পয়সায় খুব দামি মদ খেতে দেবেন, এটা শিল্পীদের একটা চলে আর কি, যে কে বিনি পয়সায় আমায় ভালো মদ খেতে দেবে তার সঙ্গে আমি শিল্প আলোচনা করব। কিন্তু এর বাইরেও তারা তো সমৃদ্ধ, এরম লোক কোথায় পাবে যে লোকটা পিকাসোর সঙ্গে দেখা করেছে 1937 সালে, যেখানে প্যারিসের প্রদর্শনীতে গের্নিকা প্রদর্শিত হচ্ছে, এই লোকটা সেখানে ছিল, ব্রাকে স্টুডিওর পাশের বাড়িতে এই লোকটা থেকেছে, এই লোকটার বন্ধু আলবের কামু কিংবা আন্দ্রে ব্রেতো কিংবা লুই বুনুয়েল। সত্যি বলতে কি, বুনুয়েলের একটি ছবি এখানে তার স্লাইডও দেখানো হচ্ছিল একটু আগে, সেই ছবির মেক্সিকো একদম পছন্দ করেনি, মেক্সিকো সরকার চেপে দিতে চাইছে, যাতে কান ফিল্ম ফেস্টিভ্যালে সেই ছবিটি যথাযথ সমাদৃত হয় তার জন্য বিরাট ক্যাম্পেইন করছেন অক্টাভিও পাজ, এবং সেইটা হচ্ছে তার পানিশমেন্ট পোস্টিংয়ে ভারতে আসার অন্যতম কারণ। আরও একটা কাজ করেছিলেন, তিনি একটা সবাই গিয়ে কিছু কথা বলেছিলেন যা তার বসের পছন্দ হয়, কিন্তু কথা হচ্ছে যে তুমি হঠাৎ প্যারিসের ইন্টেলেকচুয়াল মহলে বাবা এত প্রধান হয়ে যাবে কেন, কোথাকার কি একটা কর্মচারী, তাই তাকে একটু শাস্তি টাস্তি দিয়ে ভারতে পাঠিয়ে দেওয়া হয়েছে। তারপর আবার তিনি ভারতে এসছেন এবং সব মিলিয়ে ভারতে তিনি মনে করেছেন তার দ্বিতীয় জন্ম হয়েছে, যে বিষয়ে নিশ্চয়ই ইন্দ্রনীল দা ও সমীক বাবু বিশদে আপনাদের বলবেন। এই পুরো যে জিনিসটা হচ্ছে, এই যে ফ্রেন্ড ফিলোসফার গাইড হিসেবে অক্টাভিও পাজ কাজ করছেন, সেটা এত দূর পর্যন্ত করছেন যে কয়েকজন তরুণ তার সঙ্গে দেখা করতে আসছে, তিনি তখন ওই এম্বাসিরই কাজে বেরোচ্ছিলেন, বেরিয়ে গেছেন, ওদের ওই কালো রঙের মার্সিডিস ছিল, তাই দিয়ে কনট প্লেসে নামিয়ে দিয়ে চলে গেছেন। তারা তখন এই মাঠে বসে গল্প করছে আর লুকিয়ে বিয়ার খাচ্ছে। 1 ঘন্টার মধ্যে সেই কাজ ছেড়ে অক্টাভিও পাজ ফিরে আসছেন, ফিরে এসে বলছে আমার বাড়ি চলো, বাড়ি, তারপর দেদার টাকিলা খাওয়া, আর তারপর নিজের শিল্প নিয়ে আলোচনা। এটা একটা স্বপ্ন। মানে এবার এই সমস্ত শিল্পীদের আন্তর্জাতিক শিল্প ধারণা সম্পর্কে অক্টাভিও পাজ চোখ খুলে দিচ্ছেন, যে তোমরা, তখন তো গুগল নেই, এরকমভাবে পৃথিবী এক হয়ে যায়নি। অক্টাভিও পাজ বলছেন এই ছবিটা দেখো, এইখানে রুশ সাহিত্য পড়ো, এই জিনিস হচ্ছে পৃথিবীতে, এইভাবে এক একটা লোক দিগন্ত ভেঙে দিচ্ছে, এবং তারা এত বড় একজন মানুষের কাছ থেকে এই দীক্ষাটা পাচ্ছে, এটা ভারতের পক্ষে একটা বিরাট ব্যাপার। আবার ভারতের থেকেও অক্টাভিও পাজ অনেক কিছু পেয়েছেন যে তার একটা বড় কারণ তিনি আধারটা প্রস্তুত রেখেছিলেন। পাবলো নেরুদাও কিন্তু সিলনে এসছেন, রেঙ্গুনে এসছেন, সিঙ্গাপুরে এসছেন, 5 বছর ছিলেন। ইন্দ্রনীল দা লিখছেন যে তার একটুও ভাল লাগেনি, জঘন্য লেগেছে এই জায়গাগুলো, এবং তিনি কিচ্ছু গ্রহণ করতে চাননি, এবং তার কবিতায় এখানকার সংস্কৃতি প্রায় কোনোভাবে সংক্রামিত হয়নি ইন্দ্রনীল দার মতে। কিন্তু অক্টাভিও পাজ এখানকার বৌদ্ধ ধর্ম থেকে নিচ্ছেন, তন্ত্র থেকে নিচ্ছেন, এবং আকাশ বাতাস থেকে নিচ্ছেন, রাধাকৃষ্ণর উপাখ্যান থেকে নিচ্ছেন, এবং ভারত থেকে তিনি যেমন এত কিছু পেয়েছেন, এবার কেউ কেউ ভাবতে পারে ও তার মানে চাকরিটা বোধহয় কিছু করতে হতো না, সারাদিন শিল্পীদের সঙ্গে গল্প গুজব, মদ খাওয়া আর কবিতা লেখা। তা নয়, অক্টাভিও পাজ এখানে থেকে কাশ্মীর সম্পর্কে 12 পাতার নোট পাঠিয়েছেন, কমিউনিস্ট পার্টির ভাগ হয়ে যাওয়া নিয়ে নোট পাঠাচ্ছেন, বিহার সম্পর্কে লিখছেন যে এটা যেন একটা আনপ্ল্যান্ড কনসেন্ট্রেশন ক্যাম্প, দারিদ্র্য এবং অনাহার দেখে। এবং ওই সময় অক্টাভিও পাজ সতর্ক করছেন যে এই ধর্মনিরপেক্ষ দেশটা কিন্তু ক্রমাগত একটা হিন্দু রাষ্ট্র হওয়ার দিকে এগোচ্ছে। ওই সময় সেই দূরদর্শিতাটাও আমাদের মনে রাখতে হবে। এই সমস্ত কিছুর পর একটা গল্প বলি, গল্পটা চমৎকার। অক্টাভিও পাজ একটা বড় পুরস্কার পেয়েছেন কবিতা লিখে। এবার উনি ভাবছেন পুরস্কারটা কি নেওয়া উচিত, কেন না, ওর মতে কবিতা লেখা হচ্ছে একটা গোপন ধর্ম, একটা নিরালা সাধনা, এটা এমন ব্যক্তিগত একটা ব্যাপার, এর একটা এরকম প্রকাশ্য উদযাপন আমি করব। তা রাজা রাও বলে ওর একজন বন্ধুকে উনি বলেছেন, এই কি করব বলতো, নেব? তা রাজা রাও কোনো উত্তর না দিয়ে ওকে নিয়ে গেছেন দিল্লির উপকণ্ঠে আনন্দময়ী মার আশ্রমে। কেমন আনন্দময়ী মা বসে উপদেশ দিচ্ছেন, কথাবার্তা বলছেন, অক্টাভিও পাজ এবং অন্যান্যরা বসে আছেন। কথা বলতে বলতে আনন্দময়ী মা টক করে একটা কমলা লেবু অক্টাভিও পাজের দিকে ছুঁড়ে দিয়েছেন। তো রিফ্লেক্স অ্যাকশনে কি হবে, ওরা তো সাহেব, আমাদের মতো ক্যাচ মিস করে না, টক করে ধরে নিয়েছে। এইবার ধরে নিতে আনন্দময়ী মা অক্টাভিও পাজকে বলছেন, তোমার এই ছোট্ট সমস্যাটা সম্পর্কে রাজার কাছে শুনলাম, বাবা তোমার তো খুব দম্ভ যে তুমি বলেছো পুরস্কার নেবে না। শোনো, পুরস্কারটা নেবে, কিন্তু এটা জেনে নেবে, নির্মোহভাবে নেবে যে পুরস্কারটার মূল্য কানাকড়িও নয়। কারণ যদি তুমি পুরস্কারটা প্রত্যাখ্যান করো তাহলে পুরস্কারটাকে অনেক বেশি মূল্য দেওয়া হবে, এবং নিজেকেও খুব গুরুত্ব দেওয়া হবে। বাবা দেখেছো আমি কবিতাটাকে এমন পবিত্র একটা সাধনা বলে ভাবি যে আমি পুরস্কার প্রত্যাখ্যান করছি, এতে তোমার অহংকারটা বাড়বে আর তুমি একটা মিথ্যে পবিত্রতায় ভুগবে। ফলে ঠিক যেমন এই কমলা লেবুটা ধাঁ করে ধরে নিলে, ওই রকম হাসি মুখে প্রাইজটা নাও, কিন্তু প্রাইজটাকে বিরাট কিছু গুরুত্ব দিও না, কবিতাটা আসল, পুরস্কারটা নয়। এই উপদেশও ভারত থেকেই অক্টাভিও পাজ পাচ্ছেন। এই গল্পটা যখন ইন্দ্রনীল দা লিখেছেন তখন একটা সময় আবার ব্র্যাকেটে লিখছেন, আমার দারুণ লেগেছে মন্তব্যটা, সেটা হচ্ছে এটা একটু নাইভ হলো না, যে লোকটা সারা জীবন প্রকাশ্যে কবিতা পড়েছে, প্রায় পারফর্ম করেছে, সে লোকটা না প্রকাশ্যে পুরস্কার নিলে কেমন যেন একটা লাগবে এরকম বলছেন। আবার এক একটা জায়গায় যখন আমাদের ভারতীয় দর্শনকে অক্টাভিও পাজ যেন কিছুটা খণ্ডিত করে নিয়ে, কিছুটা সরল করে নিয়ে পরিবেশন করে বলছেন এটা এই বলে, যেখানে সেটা তার চেয়ে অনেক বেশি গভীর, জটিল ও সুদূর প্রসারী, সেখানে ইন্দ্রনীল দা লিখছেন যে এটা একটু ইউরোসেন্ট্রিক হয়ে গেছে, কিংবা একটু রিডাকশনিস্ট হয়ে গেছে। এক জায়গায় গার্বরিডও লিখেছেন, তা সেটা আমি একটু বাদ দিচ্ছি, একটু গুলিয়েও হয়তো অক্টাভিও পাজের গেছে। আবার একটা জায়গায় 70 বছর বয়সে একটা টেলিভিশন অনুষ্ঠানে রাইমন পানিক্করের সঙ্গে আলোচনা হচ্ছে, সেখানে অক্টাভিও পাজ প্রায় পানিক্করকে কথাই বলতে দিচ্ছেন না, এখানে প্রায় বুলিংয়ের মতন, আমি একাই কথা বলে যাবো আর কাউকে কথা বলতে দেবো না, এরকম একটা প্রবণতা। ফলে এই যে বইটা, এটা কিন্তু শুধুমাত্র অক্টাভিও পাজ এবং তার সময় সম্পর্কে কিছু মুগ্ধ আলোচনা নয়, এই বইটা একটা স্বচ্ছ দৃষ্টি আছে, একটা অন্তর্ভেদী দৃষ্টি আছে, যেটা অনেক সময় যে অক্টাভিও পাজকে নিয়ে লেখা তার প্রতি শ্রদ্ধা ও সমীহ বজায় রেখে তার সমালোচনা করতেও ডরায় না, তির্যকভাবে তার সম্পর্কে কথা বলতেও ডরায় না। আর এই বইটা আছে চমৎকার কিছু ছবি, তার এই ছবিগুলো এখানে দেখানো হচ্ছিল, তা আপনারা যদি বইটা পড়েন বা বইটা কেনেন ছবিগুলো দেখতে পাবেন। গ্যাব্রিয়েল গার্সিয়া মার্কেজ অত্যন্ত তরুণ বয়সে পার্টিতে মদ খেয়ে নাচছেন, এই ছবি কি আপনারা দেখেছেন? যদি না দেখে থাকেন শুধু এর জন্য ছবিটা কিনুন। ফ্রিডা কালো শাড়ি পরে বসে আছেন, তার এদিকে ওদিকে দুজন ভারতীয় নারী শাড়ি পরে আছেন। আমার মতে এই দুষ্প্রাপ্য ছবির জন্যই বইটা নেওয়া যায়। এছাড়াও কথায় যে অসামান্য ছবি এঁকেছেন ইন্দ্রনীলদা, তার জন্য আমি তাকে সাধুবাদ জানাই, এবং এর জন্য আমি মনে করি আপনাদের প্রত্যেকেরই বইটা পড়া দরকার। ধন্যবাদ, নমস্কার।
থ্যাংক ইউ ভেরি মাচ চন্দ্রিল। চন্দ্রিলের মতো ওইরকম গড়গড় করে তো বাংলা আমি বলতে পারি না, সো আমি ইংরেজিতেই বলছি। মানে চন্দ্রিল হ্যাজ বিন এ ভেরি গুড স্টুডেন্ট অফ ইন্দ্রনীল, and that has not changed. He has remained a very good student because he has read the book so thoroughly. I have read the book also, so I can relate to whatever Chandril is saying. At times you may feel that the book is going off at a tangent, you know, that he has forgotten what he is writing on. But then it comes back every now and then you realize the relation between why he wrote that, why he went off at a tangent. So it is actually encompassing a lot of situations and a lot of people who have played an important role, not only in the life of Octavio Paz, but also in the kind of thinking that he had, in the kind of creativity that he exhibited. So all these connections have come also alive in this book. So we would now like to, of course, as Chandril said, there is a sort of nightclub called M. Roy in Mexico. I've also seen a restaurant called Tagore in Amsterdam, you know, because, and when I asked the owner, why did you name it Tagore? He said, Selta Badbe tate. So they have other intentions of doing that. Right.
The biggest bookshop chain in Mexico is called
Gandhi, yeah, okay. Right. Now, Shomikda has also read the book, and Shomikda, I would like you to make a few comments now, after which then we can go into a discussion.
Let me make a confession. I haven't read the whole of the book. Because, as Chandrila said, it's gone not just into Paz's life, it creates a large scenario of relationships, connections in history, in culture, between individuals, between cultures, through generations. And I'm usually a slow reader. I need time to take things in. And even when I'm taking things in, when I find an area which is opening up, I shut the book, get into that area, explore it a little more in my collection of books, and then I come back to the old book. So that's how my reading goes. So this is not a book that I would finish like that, because of my way of reading, not for any other reason. So I've read 1/3 of the book. So I'll talk a little about that 1/3. In that 1/3, Indranil goes into the history of Mexico, the Mexican Revolution, and sets Mexico in a global cultural context. And only after he has located Mexico in that rich, bubbling, throbbing setting, he draws the connections between faraway Mexico and our country. Because that's a route that his subject takes, coming from Mexico to India. So it's a fascinating book in that sense. And the point that both Raman and Chandril have made, that he doesn't always focus or stick to an Octavio Paz focus. He allows all these pieces of information to gather together, to connect, and create a large chiaroscuro. And I enjoy that. I enjoy that immensely. The part that I read, what was fascinating me most was, I would say, two things. A, this man, Octavio Paz, had a father who virtually abandoned the family because of his political engagement with a revolutionary world, and a grandfather who was a supporter of all the causes against which his son was fighting. A father and a grandfather, two different camps. Not just different camps, but aggressively fighting camps. And a son who gets more of the grandfather because he's there, and is there with his ideas, more right-wing ideas, even supporting a dictator against whom his son is rebelling, and a father who is not there, who has virtually abandoned his family. So, at that level, you can imagine a kind of natural bonding happens between the boy and the grandfather, rather than the missing father. And even a kind of a natural resentment against a father who doesn't care for us, stays somewhere else. He doesn't understand what the father does, even. So, a Zapatista father and a fairly right-wing grandfather. See the tensions, and as I read through the tensions, and as I read through the historicization that Indranil makes, locating these people in this larger trajectory of history, something that has always intrigued me and still intrigues me, and I still go on exploring it, that if you look at the history of Latin America, not just Mexico, but even the other countries, Cuba, Chile, Venezuela, endangered right now under American threat. There may be violence, eruption in Venezuela any day. So even as we go through these experiences, study these experiences, and we look at the histories of these different countries, there is a kind of a seesaw movement between the right and the left. We have Castro, we have Chavez, and we have Pinochet's. We have Neruda virtually being killed. We have seen a film which documents the slow poisoning of Neruda, how his houses are broken into and destroyed by the rulers. So all these histories, and again, in virtually all these countries, there's a left government ruling for a while, and then there is another swing to the right. This goes on. And I go back into the history, a history which is further enriched by the information, the elements that my friend weaves into his narrative of a single poet. Where, if I look at the history of Latin America, the Aztecs, the Mayans, the so-called Indians, because Columbus thought that he had arrived in India already, so he called all of these people Indians, thanks to Columbus's terrible mistake. They're still Indians in a way. So think of the pre-Columbian, before Columbus arrived here and colonized it. That history, those civilizations, curbed, marginalized by the colonial powers. And the colonials bringing in also a very, very rich culture, the Spanish culture. The Spanish culture, the indigenous cultures, the clashes, the choices that people make. And even in these choices, the question of class. In the case of Octavio Paz, for example, there's this wonderful little bit that he brings in right at the beginning of the book, where the mother is more Spanish, and therefore her looks, even her eyes, the color of her eyes, that Paz inherited, creates a problem for Paz in school, because he looks like a foreigner, and that's how his fellow students think him and treat him and tease him, that he has to face. And with the father out there, with the Mexican Revolution, with Zapata, and a mother who carries in a bearing, in her appearance, in her manners, in her looks, the Colombian culture, the aristocratic culture, the tensions, the cultural tensions. So Neruda and Paz will always be different. Marquez and Paz will be different. But in these differences, in the contradictions, clashes between these differences, a different kind of language emerges, a different kind of sensibility emerges, a sensibility brewed in contradictions, but growing out of that into a different space altogether. And even when at one point Indranil emphasizes the point that one of the perennial themes that Paz cultivates is a theme of a spiral. Things beginning, going into rounds and rounds and rounds, and then ultimately coming back through the same spirals into the source. At one level of meaning, at one level of reading, it's fascinating, but you see the difference there also. It is a spiral that comes back to its roots, which is a kind of a stable past. And the socialist dream, the communist dreams of Marquez or Neruda, are not dreams of a return, dreams of a going forth into an infinity of freedom. So you see the different voices, cultures, sensibilities in Paz's life, in Paz's poetry, and in an extremely rich narrative that Indranil weaves out of these. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Samikda. Chandril, Samikdaর কথাগুলো তো শুনলে। On the basis of that, তুমি কিছু অ্যাড করতে চাও, because you have been threatening যে তুমি চলে যাবে। হ্যাঁ, কিছু অ্যাড করবে না। Okay, then we will move into a kind of conversation. Indranil, is there any part of the book which you think reading back, looking back, that it has come out very well. Would you like to read a portion for the audience? Yeah, because it's important to create a feel for what you have written, even for the audience.
Is it going? Is it recording?
Take this.
No, the light is on. Okay. Hello. Can you hear? Okay. So this is an occasion for me to acknowledge something. When I grew up in Calcutta, and when I was about 21, 22 years old, at that time we used to go to these seminars mostly at Seagull and other places where Shomikda used to talk. And one thing that stuck with me is that how Shomikda made these amazing connections between, while he was talking about Soviet cinema, making connection between cinema, theater, painting, poetry, political ideology, all these things. And I used to marvel at that. And from that age, I thought, this is what I want to do in my life. Cinema is not an isolated thing. Cinema, who thinks? Only some silly film students think that cinema is, and we were talking about that, is an isolated. Cinema is in a network of culture. So when we are talking about cinema, we are talking about cultural history. And so if I have been able to accomplish even a small part of that in this book, about connecting poetry with fiction, history, painting, so many other things, political movements, etc., then this book owes a huge debt to you. Because over the years, I have been to many other places in the world and film institutes. Nobody talks like that. So Shomikda is quite unique in that. This kind of a... Hello, okay. This kind of cultural history is unique. And in the books I'm writing now also, there is this aspect of this cultural history that has been... it has become organically a part of my life. Okay, so quickly, many of the things have been covered, and I'm so grateful to all of you all to give such great feedback on my book, make such great comments. And yes, the book was in research for a long, long time, and I'm the first person who got the declassified documents of Octavio Paz. Now, one thing is that in Latin America, we have to understand there is a deep connection between literature and diplomacy. Somehow, the diplomatic profession was one of the few professions that was available that writers thought was very dignified and exciting, partly because that it took them to different places, no other cultures, no other languages. So I do not think that in India we have that connection. Nowhere in the world France has that, but in Latin America it is a very deep connection between literature and diplomacy. Large number of the major writers were actually career diplomats, professional diplomats. And we have to understand Octavio Paz among them. And among that, one important thing, there are things that are coming to my mind that I have not written in the book. I'm not finished with Octavio Paz actually. And is that this idea of a Latin America that we call today was actually not born in Latin America, but in Paris. Latin Americans didn't meet each other within South America. They met each other in Paris. Paris was the hub in the 50s, 60s. And that is where they realized that there are commonalities between all these countries. And they found that we have a unique character which is very different from North American culture. So they started calling it Anglo-American culture and versus the Latin culture. And in French, the French were very happy to know that you have a Latin connection. So they tried to, there have been many invasions of France trying to take over Latin American countries. So the whole construction of Latin America was done in Paris. And most of these diplomats, they spent almost like everybody. Those of you all have read of Garcia Marquez I call him by his pet name, Gabo. Garcia Marquez used to talk to us almost every day about his years in Paris. And those were the formative years. Those were the great years. Mario Vargas Llosa, the great Nobel laureate Peruvian, he used to talk about how Paris transformed them. And what interesting thing is that this diplomatic profession is key to Octavio Paz's encounter with different parts of the world. And this tremendous thirst to know other cultures, thank you, Chandril, this tremendous thirst to know other cultures, what Octavio Paz
often uses the word the other. This concept of the other is omnipresent in Octavio Paz, not as an oppositional other, but an other which is within us. For example, when he was in India, he was fascinated with the concept of Ardhanarishwar. He thought that Western mind has created such polarizations between, is based on polarizations. And he thought, what a wonderful culture that sees the woman within the man and the man within the woman. And these were the ideas that he was attracted to. And part of his interest in India was, of course, as others have referred, his kind of formative influence. His father-in-law was the greatest influence. He spent more time with his father-in-law than his first wife, and who was interested in Indology and all those things. And there was a movement at that time. The whole world was taken over by Annie Besant and the Theosophical movement. And in fact, the construction of Latin American identity is so much dependent on India as an example of a non-Western civilization. So India became a constant point of reference in the intellectual discourse of identity formation in Latin America. One day I plan to write a book on a historic kind of comparative book of ideas between how India is crucial to Latin American identity. Anyway, so the point is that for him, he came to India on two occasions. One, he did not like the country. He thought that all Indians were so sad. He never saw a smile in anybody's face when 1952 when he came. And he wrote in one letter to Victoria Ocampo. Victoria Ocampo, for those who don't know, Tagore's lover, Latin American lover. And he wrote to Victoria Ocampo, the heat on one side and the British on the other have taken all joy out of Indian lives. That was his experience of India. And he was obsessed with the heat. How do I get out of this? But I find a mythic structure in this. All the great myths of the world, there is a first calling. Your destiny calls out to you, but you are not ready for the call. And you reject the call. And then you go away. And then there is a second calling. And then you are more ready. You have evolved in life to respond to the call. And so you respond with all passion to that call. So this is the thing that happened to Octavio Paz during his second trip. When he was promoted, he became the ambassador of Mexico. His house became the meeting place of Indian writers, painters. His life flourished. He saw everything flourishing around him. He found the great love of his life, Marie Jose Tramini, who is the center of his life. He called it the second birth, and it is life, and it is like that all things came together. There are different aspects to a life, and the emotional life, the intellectual life, the creative life, the sexual life, the social life, everything came together and was pumping on all cylinders in his life. So the India years, and all Paz scholars agree with me, the India years were Octavio Paz's most bountiful years, are the most brilliant years. If you see the list of books, I would like to draw some attention to some concrete details. Tina, can you play the list slide on the next slide? So to give you an idea about the amount of productivity, imagine that he was a full-time ambassador. He had social engagements. He had lots of parties inside the house. He traveled the length and breadth of the country in his car. Who travels by car in India? 4,000 kilometers from Delhi to Afghanistan each way. He traveled to Tamil Nadu by car. So he was passionately, and more importantly, he had a passionate love, which is like a full-time affair for me. That's like a full-time job, the love affair. And this was the time when his life was so erotic that his poetry becomes extremely erotic. Octavio Paz, I can tell you, is perhaps the most erotic poet in the history of literature. There are passages I can read, you will run for cover, if you read those poems. So anyway, among just to show his output while in India, the 6 years, 62 to 68, in the first trip he wrote only one poem during the 6-month period. Now he wrote I have the Spanish version, Ladera Este, which means east slope. The east slope is a collection of poetry around India, where India appears in images. India becomes like a selfie, like he is going to Rishikesh and he's talking about Rishikesh. So the words Rishikesh, the words and everything he sees in India reminds him of Mexico. One day he's standing at the balcony of his room, of his hotel, and he says he sees the early morning people in Cochin going to the mass, and he writes, with shawls of foam and jasmine in the ear, the women go to the 5 o'clock mass, not in Mexico City or in Cadiz, in Travancore. You see, for a moment, he is standing in his balcony, he could not finish, am I in India or am I in Mexico? This is like Mexico, the women going to mass at 5 o'clock with jasmine in their hair, right? And so there are little things. He was deeply immersed in Buddhist philosophy, Nagarjuna, Dharmakirti, Bhartrihari. He loved philosopher poets. Most of our philosophers were poets, so he loved them. And so, just to give you an overview, the Ladera Este is a collection of his poems, and you will find references to India, to Udaipur, to wherever he is traveling. There is a kind of a, I will call it a kind of a poetic selfie. He was taking a selfie of the place and the emotion along with the emotions. And for example, in Rishikesh, he writes, in the Rishikesh, the Ganges is still green. A few lines later, above and below, great gulfs of calm. And you suddenly said, this country is full of springs. You means his girlfriend at that time. You, Marie Jose, his wife, you said, this country is full of springs. That night, I washed my hands in your breasts. Now look at this use of this word. Octavio Paz was a surrealist poet. Here the Indian landscape, the personal life, merges into a certain kind of a surrealistic metaphor. I washed my hands in your breasts. And so Ladera Este, the East Slope, the collected poems, it is part of the collected poems, you'll find it there. And the poems written in India comprise a separate collection called Tale of Two Gardens. Ladera Este incorporates, the East Slope incorporates two other collections of poetry, Blanco and towards the beginning, Hacia el Comienzo. And Octavio Paz always thought that his life existed between two gardens. One garden is the garden of his childhood in his childhood home, where there was a tree that used to reach out to him, as it were, and it was the tree was speaking, as it were. The trees are very important. That is why I have this book, the title is The Tree Within. And on the other hand, the tree of his house in Delhi on 13 Prithviraj Road. And he married his wife below the neem tree. So these two trees are like the bookends of his life. And that is why he wrote a book called A Tale of Two Gardens. And so these are only his poetic works. Next slide. These are the volumes of prose fiction that he wrote in India. To give you an idea, El Monogrammático, the Monkey Grammarian, is a amazing book about his journey through Rajasthan. But it is not only about a journey through Rajasthan, it mingles with many other things. It is about language, about poetry itself, and so many other things. This is the book that inspired M.F. Hussain to do an entire series called the Hanuman series. Right, 16 paintings where he pays. The first painting is a tribute. When in the history of India have we had cultural cross-pollination of this level, to this depth, that our greatest painter was inspired by an Mexican painter's vision of India, the Monkey Grammarian. So I have put the English translations below for those who want to follow up. El Monogrammático is the Monkey Grammarian. An amazing book of essays, of travelogue, genre-bending book. The other is Alternating Current, a collection of his essays on Buddhist logic. Now, Octavio Paz said something, showing that I want to draw your attention with this, is that he resented the fact that when Western people talk about India, they use the word spirituality. And Octavio Paz used to say that I don't know what a spirituality is. I mean, it's such a vague, namby-pamby term, nebulous term. And And he complained the fact that Indian culture has been pigeonholed by the West as spiritual, it has not intellectually engaged with its literature. And this is why, because he said that poetry-wise, I'm more attracted to Japan, but India taught me how to think. He thought that the Buddhist thinkers, his favorite was Nagarjuna. Nagarjuna, Dharmakirti taught him logic. So alternative current is his reflections on Buddhist logic and the use, how to develop an argument. He was as great an essayist as a poet. And there is a deep organic connection between the poetry and the prose. And so alternative current alternates, as it were, alternating between the creative and the thinking. And Octavio was that kind of a person, though he was a great intuitive poet, the last great surrealist I call him. His intuition was as great as his analytical powers. Once Mario Vargas Llosa told us, he was a close friend of Octavio Paz as well as Garcia Marquez, and he once told us that, you know what, they were so different people. Garcia Marquez didn't like any analysis. He hated academics. He didn't read non-fiction, etc. He just wanted to hang out with people, have fun, etc. Whereas Octavio was the opposite. Whenever he went through an experience, he needed to have it in front of him, cut it up, analyze it, compare it with other cultures, etc. So he was a very different kind of person. And okay, the second group of essays about India is called Conjunctions and Disjunctions. Conjunciones y disjunciones. Another, it is about the concept of the body in Indian culture and the absence of the body, what he calls the non-body. And in once again, coming back to Buddhism, Hindu, Tantrism, and he suddenly brings up amazing pursuit, amazing insights about India that will enrich us. You know, when I was in JNU just 2 weeks ago, 1 week ago, one professor asked me, do you think that Octavio Paz's insights about India can enrich our idea about the idea of India? And I was taken aback. I never thought about that. You know, I was thrilled. Yes, of course. And I have to write about this. Yes, of course. There are so many things we do not understand. We know it through Octavio Paz. Right. Recently, our Kiran Desai, who was nominated for the Oscar, for the Booker, she wrote in her Booker interview that her understanding of India was deepened by Octavio Paz. Anyway, La Llama Doble is about love and eroticism in poetry, in the history of poetry. He took the notes while in India. And later he wrote about 20 years later, but all the notes were taken in India when he said that he was overwhelmed with love. And he tried to understand the emotion of love. And I find it very interesting because Sophocles used to say, the only thing I can talk about with authority is love. And Octavio Paz said, the only thing in the world that I profess to know is love. And love always with a capital L. And this book, Love, The Double Flame, is the most popular book amongst university students across Latin American universities, even today. And then later in life, he wrote his Memories of India just close to his deathbed. He wrote called Vislumbres de la India, what is it called? In Light of India. And in that, what is interesting is that I could not get much material from his Memories of India. And I was reminded of the historian Ramchandra Guha's comment that whenever somebody writes an autobiography of a memoir, it is to be understood as a preemptive strike against a future biographer. That autobiography, the whole purpose of an autobiography is that don't come near me, I'm giving it to you. But everybody has three lives, a public life, a private life, and a secret life. And it is through the secret life that the cracks open up and the light comes through, right? So that is why I found when I wrote his years in India, I could not draw much from his memoir of India. Everything that was important is not there. But even in his deathbed, as he was recovering from cancer at the age of 83, in his hospital bed, he was translating Bhartrihari from Sanskrit to Spanish. And the impact of his intervention with Indian culture and the way he was a bridge between cultures, brought India to Latin America to India, it is incalculable. I think in the entire history of our Indian civilization, we have an example like this of a major creative artist from the Western Hemisphere immersing himself in India, drawing from India, and there are sometimes you cannot, you have to see how this India works in Octavio Paz in an indirect way. I'll give you a small 2-line poem. He was influenced by haiku, and he used to write small poems. And one of the poems, he's sitting in his study at 13 Prithviraj Road, and he looks at the garden is teeming with life. How many kinds of birds that he had never seen in his life, and flowers and insects and that he had never seen. And then, while looking through his window, he looks at a hummingbird. And because it's a 2-liner, I might as well say it in Spanish first. It says, quietud, no en la rama, en el aire. No en el aire, en el instante, el colibri. This is all the poem is. This means stillness, not on the branch, in the air. Not in the air, in the moment. Hummingbird. Now look at this. For me, this poem, this little poem, is key to understanding Octavio Paz. This is how Buddhism, all his experience of Buddhism comes. Hummingbird is something there in the air. Looks like static in the air, not on the branch, in the air. And how does it arrive at that stillness? Through rapid movement of the wing. So like a helicopter. Rapid movement. So that stillness is only apparent. There is an intense activity that is going behind it. And this is he called dhyan. The Hindu concept of dhyan, or the Buddhist concept. So if it comes together, crystallized in the image of the hummingbird. So if you're looking at a mapping of what Buddhist idea goes into Octavio Paz, what Hindu ideas goes into Octavio Paz, it will be reductionist. But we have to see that the hummingbird became for him, comes back 2 more times in his poetry, as an aspirational state of being. Like Keats wants to become the nightingale, Octavio Paz wanted to become the hummingbird. Calm without, but fire within. So this is many other different ways. There are lots of material in my book to go after it, but I could do a small reading, right?
Yeah, just a small reading. There's some time management also to be done. The starting time is never fixed, but the ending time is always fixed. You see, so we have to keep to some. I think we have about 15 minutes left, and we would like to take some questions from the audience as well, right? So please do go ahead.
The Indian chapter 8. For example, there was a party in 1985. Indira Gandhi invited her for the Nehru Memorial Lecture, and then she died. She was assassinated. What is interesting is that, and next year Rajiv Gandhi invited her back in 1985. And then in 1985, there was a party thrown at the house of Shamlal, who was the editor of Times of India and a very, very close friend. And in that party, Shamlal, a very, very erudite gentleman, he said, there were many poets in the party. So he said, Octavio, I have heard you have picked out you have published a book called Renga. Renga is a Japanese concept of collaborative poetry. Like, we are poets together, you write one line, pass it on to me, I write another line, pass it on to you, it comes back from the first person, goes back again, and then
it's like an antakshari of poetry.
Yeah, but it has its own. So he did an experimentation. He used to write letters, do collaborative poetry through letters. And often this happened in multiple languages. So between Spanish and English. So he had published a book called Ringa of his collaborative poetry with 4 poets. And Shamlal had seen it. And so Shamlal says, since there's so many writers over here, why don't we have a new kind of Ringa with multiple poets coming together to write a poem together? And Octavio Paz was very excited. And now, this time, it is going to be between Hindi, Urdu, English, and Spanish, 4 languages. Now, and this book, this poem, converted to a common English register, was called An Ode to Friendship. And among the people present there, it is incredible. The people who were present there was, Vatsayana Aggai, the great writer, Sachidananda Vatsayan, Shrikant Verma, Nirmal Verma, Swaminathan was also there, and several others. And so the papers were distributed, and sheets of paper were distributed to the 3 of them, and the poem was composed according to the tradition of Hindi and Urdu poetry, a 6-line stanza followed by a concluding couplet. With the poem starting and ending with Octavio Paz in Spanish, it had 2 concluding lines by each one of them, Aggai and Verma in Hindi, leading to 3 different endings. Translated into a common English register, the Ringa, titled A Poem of Friendship. This is how it ran. Paz writes, friendship is a river and a ring. Passes it on to Aggai. Aggai writes, the river flows through the ring. The ring is an island in the river. Then Shrikant Verma writes, the river says, before there was no river, after there is only a river. Before and after, that which erases friendship. Comes back to Paz. He writes, erases it? The river flows, forming the ring. Aggai writes, friendship erases time, and thus it frees us. It is a river that, flowing, invents its rings. Shrikant Verma writes, in the sands of the river, our tracks are erased. In the sands, we seek the river. Where has it gone? Paz writes, we live between oblivion and memory. This moment is an island, weathered. This moment is an island, weathered by incessant time. So, when a little detail, I will just conclude with that little detail, is that his popularity was such, he loved scandals, he created scandals all his life. Like Chandril referred to the diplomatic scandal that brought him to India, because he could not accept that Buñuel's film was banned in Mexico, and he mobilized the entire French elite community to get the film reversed. So as a punishment, he was sent to India. That go far away, as far away from Paris as possible. So send them to India. And his ending was more dramatic. It became an international scandal. Is that he has been, this is 68, so he has been following in his diplomatic files, in his diplomatic declassified documents, I can find that he's writing to his government that there are student movements all along. That is happening in Berkeley in 1968, May 68 in Paris, there is happening everywhere. This is shaking the consciousness, this is a new consciousness that is being born. And he reports about Indian student movements. We did not know, in 68 there were so many Indian movements. And he lists them, all the Indian student movements that are happening in Kashmir, in Delhi and other. He's reporting to his government. So be careful, something can happen in Mexico. And in Mexico, in October, in September, is 1968, a student movement breaks out, which leads to, and he was in Kasauli in Himachal Pradesh at that time. And in the shortwave radio, he told his president, he called up his president, he told the president, whatever happens, I do not want you to use force against students. Whatever happens, all their demands are logical. Please try to meet, but don't use force. In spite of that, in the BBC radio, he heard his government has used force, and there was a large-scale massacre. 369 students were killed. That event is called Tlatelolco massacre. It is like the center of Mexico City, and it is still discussed to this day. he immediately decided that he cannot represent a government that does a massacre of students, and especially when the president told him that they will not open arms against students. And immediately he resigns, and when he resigns, the whole world goes aflame that Octavio Paz has resigned. And you cannot believe this. What happened is that the Mexican government was extremely embarrassed that Octavio Paz has resigned from his position, and this gave a fillip, a great impetus to the student movement, and it went up in the top gear. And he was, of course, he was leaving his diplomatic services of 23 years, and when he came down from the mountain, from Kasauli to Delhi, he found there were lots of young boys and girls standing outside his house on Prithviraj Road to congratulate him for resigning. And then he found that his house, every day, total strangers used to come and congratulate him. All Indian intellectuals used to congratulate him. In IIC, they'd give a special farewell and solidarity with him for standing up with the students, supporting the student movement. And then, when he was going back, within 1 month he had to go back he didn't want to go back to Mexico because he could be murdered. The state would have killed him. So he decided to go on exile. He lived in Cambridge for some time. So when he was going, and at that time in Delhi, you had to take a train to Bombay. From Bombay, you would take a ship, right? So in Bombay, he took a train, the Paschim Express. When he took the Paschim Express to go to Bombay, from Delhi to Bombay, he was surprised that his train number, coach number, seat number went around all across India. That Octavio Paz is traveling in Purba Express. And when he went to the train station, New Delhi, he found there were people standing with marigold flowers to serenade him, and hundreds of people at the train station. And then not only that, he was not only overwhelmed. When the train traveled at every junction, people were waiting at even at 2:30 at night at Baroda, where there's the Baroda School of Art. The students who are great names in Indian art today, they were standing there with a packet of sweets for Octavio Paz and a garland of marigold. It is funny to me because marigold did not exist in India. Marigold flowers came to India from Mexico. And so we were serenading him with the same Mexican flowers, the marigold, and they were there to serenade him, and he was obviously overwhelmed. And so his wife said in a letter that India gave to Octavio what the kind of love and honor that they reserve for their spiritual gurus. Octavio became a poet guru to India.
Thank you very much for that, Indranil. A lot of insights and a lot of connections which you have drawn over here. Now, we would take questions from the audience. Of course, Shomikda, even if you have a question, you can pose a question to him. So who would like to ask a question? Go ahead.
Hello, my name is Shayoni. So you spoke about Octavio Paz being very interested in the organ-nourisher concept and also the dualities. So I had heard that he was also very enamored by the tantric philosophy, and could you discuss briefly a little about that and where he might have got his source from about tantric philosophy?
Well, all the details are there in the book. Yeah. Hello.
Hello. No, I think this is not working. Yeah.
Yes. What he makes out of tantric, there is an entire. This is a biography, right? So I trace his life. And how he came across tantric painting. He came across an exhibition in his hotel room. In the first Ashoka Hotel ground floor, there was this Kumar Art Gallery where he first saw tantric painting, and he became friends with the Kumar. There's a long story. My book is filled with anecdotes and stories, right? You can just read it for the stories. So he organized the first exhibition of tantric painting in Paris. It was a traveling exhibition through Europe, and he wrote the catalog for the tantric art. So what Octavio was trying to do, what he found exciting about tantra, was that he found tantric art extremely modern in sensibility. Why did he find that so? And he makes these amazing connections that we don't make. And remind me, I'll talk about Duchamp also about this, that he says that what is modern art? It is no longer the world of objects that is represented anymore. It is the representation of ideas, right? So he was saying, when I look at tantric art, these are concepts. These are concepts converted to images. So painting becomes a thinking. Painting becomes an object of thinking. Painting becomes a representation of thought. A painting is an essay, right? So he saw tantric art doing what Marcel Duchamp or the others were doing all in modern art. So he thought this was modernist way before modernism. And suddenly he gives us a perspective that we did not think about. For example, among the books he wrote in India was a book on Marcel Duchamp. And that book is called Appearance Stripped Bare. An extraordinary, very difficult book, but extremely great book, Marcel Duchamp. And Appearance Stripped Bare. Look at the title. What is Appearance Stripped Bare? Isn't it Maya? The Hindu concept of Maya. What is the world without the world of appearances? What is a thing? What is a bottle of water without the appearance of the bottle of water? What is a body, human body, without the appearance of the human body? Right? So this is what modern art is doing. This is what Picasso was doing. This is what Braque was doing. They were trying to remove the world of appearances. Can we see the world without the world of appearance? That is why he calls it, what a wonderful phrase, appearance stripped bare. It is not a female body that is being stripped bare. Not a nude, but it is the world of appearances. Suddenly, he makes the idea of Maya, of what we think is a very vague, wishy-washy idea of Maya. What is Maya? We really don't know. And he suddenly makes it so modernist as an idea. He says Maya is modern art, trying to understand what are the basic principles that govern the world. How does the mind work? Right? So, how is the world? Going back to basic principles of the structures of the world, right? So suddenly, in one of the last poems that he wrote, when he was in the ship, when he was drifting away from the Bombay port, and he writes a poem of invocation called Shiva and Parvati. And it's a beautiful poem about homage to the Indian gods. And he writes in the last line, as the fog envelops the Taj Hotel, that is the last image of India that you get, and it moves away, and suddenly the fog moves away, and for a moment he sees India through the fog, through that clarity. And he says, the last line is, I watch clarity. It is the moment of Maya, when you see the thing beyond appearances. So this is a guy who was carrying India in his head till his last day. So when New Yorker tells him to write about Mexico-India relations, you have Mexico-USA relations, which is like Octavio Paz, the ultimate authority on writing about Mexico versus USA, what is the historical relationship between the two. And the first thing in New Yorker he writes, in order to understand the Mexico-USA relationship, first you have to understand the relationship between Hindus and Muslims in India. Everything goes back to India. He says there are two versions of the same civilization. Mexico and the United States are two versions of the American civilization. Right? So,
very nicely put. And that's why somebody wanted to build a wall between them. Okay, any other question? We are up for time, but maybe one other short question or two.
I wanted to ask about the question of intercitationality, because his work is intercitational. He's doing poetry, he's doing diplomacy, he's doing literature, he's doing thinking out loud, generating conviviality, a lot of other things. So how do we sort of write or begin to approach a project of a person like this? What kind of methodology would you say that you went into when you were writing this book?
My book is fundamentally a biography. So I am tracing the biography, but in tracing the biography, what I find that it is astonishing that his life goes through so many historical events that are public. The beauty of biography is that it allows you an inlet between the private, the microcosmic private life, personal life, and the larger public life. And what is fascinating, why I continue to write biographies, is that this connection between the private and the public, where one small life mirrors, as it were, a larger public history. And the more complex the character, more dynamic is this relation between the personal and the public history. So it is in that mirror of his own biographical life, we find that he has been through all major historical events. He has been through the Spanish Civil War, the Mexican Revolution, he has been through he was at the meeting where the United Nations was formed, he was in the middle of the surrealist movement, he was in the middle of the modernist movement. You can go on. He was a structuralist. He was fascinated with structuralism, post-structuralism. And every time every movement, every ism was a way of opening up your mind, right? Our minds are basically latent. They are dark. So certain ism comes and lights up that part of the mind through which we look at the world. So when you do a biography, the biographical method was the most important one for me as a method, because the biography, it is more than biography, it is what we call life writing, because it encompasses cultural history as well. And so I found that the more I dig into it, the more material I found. In fact, I've cut a lot in this book. So it moves in so many directions that biography illuminates, as it one life illuminates the whole world. And it is like Mexico is asking through the figure of Octavio Paz, who am I? How do I become modern? What is my modernity? And it is in the life of the individual who, through his personal drama, personal dilemma, we find a larger social, historical, a nation asking itself through the person. Very much like Nehru's discovery of India. Like it is India asking him, tell me, who am I? And that impulses him to write that book. And interestingly, Octavio Paz read the Discovery of India in Spanish a few years after it came out, translated by Victoria Ocampo, few chapters, and he was writing the history of Mexico, which is called The Labyrinth of Solitude, trying to understand the solitude of Mexico and trying to understand the psychological history of Mexicans. And he was deeply influenced by Nehru's way of looking at history as a key to understanding the psychology of the people. So there is a lot of coming. I've parallelly shown Nehru's line and how he adapts that line to his own way. So biography moves into life writing, in short.
Indranil, thank you. Thank you very much for a wonderful insight into what you have written. Possibly when Samik says that he read only 1/3 of the book and then he had to pause, go into other areas and come back. I would agree with him there, though I made an effort to read the book right through like a good student. But then I also told Indranil that I want to revisit some of the parts of the book because that takes me to other areas where I would like to know a little bit more. And it's wonderful the way you have described it. I'm sure that Samik's way of reading was also perhaps in your writing, or did you write it in one go, right through? Or did you pause for 6 months sometimes? Did you pause for 3 months, going into the other areas which you branched into?
I start my book with a quote from Salman Rushdie, Midnight's Children, where Rushdie's character says that to know me, just the one of me, you have to swallow the world as well. And I am a swallower of lives. And I love that. That is what the book is. It is not Octavio Paz. I have to swallow many, 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 many lives. So a lot of research went into it. A lot of research.
One can see that in the result of the book. And this should have kindled your curiosity about the book, all of you. So how do they get hold of a book? Can you end with that?
Amazon.
Amazon, you see. Right, one day delivery from Amazon. Okay, thank you very much, Shomikda also, and Chandril in absentia. And of course, you have been a wonderful audience. So let us go with these thoughts of Octavio Paz and kindled beyond a point of no return, which takes you to the book. Good evening.